These weren't ordinary cucumbers. They were kosher dills, cured in garlic, salt, and cold brine, never vinegar, by Jewish picklers who worked from dawn till dusk. For families with no refrigerators and little money, pickling was a way to stretch the harvest through the winter. Every barrel was a science experiment of patience and pride. Immigrant children earned pennies, fetching pickles for neighbors, and customers argued over which barrel had the perfect snap. The pickle became more than a side dish. It was New York's crunch of resilience. The taste of something sour turned into joy. It stood proudly beside pastrami sandwiches, next to corned beef, beside every meal that told the same story. We took what was humble and made it last. And that's how a brined cucumber became one of the city's first street legends. 6. Gefilte fish. No dish confused Americans more, or meant more to Jewish families, than gefilte fish. In the shtetls of Eastern Europe, fish was expensive, so families learned to stretch it, grinding scraps of pike, carp, or whitefish with onions, eggs, and matzo meal, then shaping it into tender patties simmered in broth. When immigrants brought the recipe to New York, it became a Sabbath essential. You'd see mothers at the fish market, haggling for heads and bones, turning waste into tradition. The smell filled every tenement hallway on Friday afternoons. Sweet, savory, unmistakably Jewish. To outsiders, it looked strange, but to those who knew, gefilte fish wasn't just food, it was identity. Served chilled with a dab of horseradish, it reminded them of home, of rivers they left behind, of grandparents they'd never see again. It was proof that you could lose everything and still keep flavor, still keep faith alive on a single plate. 7. Matzo ball soup. When a pot of matzo ball soup simmered in a New York tenement kitchen, it meant one thing. Someone cared enough to make comfort out of almost nothing. Born from necessity and faith, this dish turned matzah, the unleavened bread of Passover, into something warm, soft, and healing. Immigrant mothers crushed leftover matzah, mixed it with eggs and schmaltz, rolled it into balls, and dropped them into bubbling chicken broth that filled the air with hope. For many Jewish families, chicken itself was a luxury, so bones, skin, and necks were simmered for hours to coax out every ounce of flavor. The broth carried the scent of home, garlic, dill, and a hint of memory. Children came running when the spoon hit the pot. Matzo ball soup wasn't just food, it was medicine for the soul. Served on Sabbath evenings or to cure colds, it reminded everyone that love, patience, and a bit of cleverness could turn scraps into something sacred. Even today, one spoonful feels like a hug from history, proof that even the poorest kitchens in old New York could still serve grace in a bowl. 8. Pastrami on rye bread. If New York had a flavor, it would be pastrami on rye. The sandwich began in the smoky backrooms of Jewish delis run by Romanian immigrants who brought with them an old trick, preserving beef through brining, smoking, and seasoning. What started as a necessity became an art form. They took cheap cuts of brisket, rubbed them with garlic, coriander, and pepper, then smoked them slow, over wood, until the meat turned crimson and tender. Layered high on slices of fresh rye bread, smeared with mustard, and served warm, it was more than lunch. It was liberation from blandness. In the Lower East Side, delis became sacred gathering spots. Workers from nearby factories lined up shoulder to shoulder, swapping stories between bites. Each sandwich told the story of making do, of transforming struggle into flavor. By the 1920s, pastrami on rye wasn't just a Jewish meal, it was New York itself on a plate. The chew of the bread, the spice of the meat, the tang of the mustard, all proof that hardship could be smoked, sliced, and served with pride. 9. Corned beef brisket. Before corned beef became a deli classic, it was an immigrant's miracle. Jewish butchers in early 1900s, New York learned to transform one of the toughest, cheapest cuts of meat, brisket, into something tender and deeply flavorful. They cured it in salt brine for days, boiled it with onions, garlic, and peppercorns, then sliced it thin to serve on rye or beside boiled potatoes. It was a masterclass in patience. For families who couldn't afford prime cuts, corning was survival, preserving meat without wasting a single bite. On Fridays, the smell drifted through the tenements, a mix of spice, salt, and comfort that told neighbors the Sabbath was near. At first, corned beef was eaten plain, sometimes shared by 3 or 4 people from one slab, but over time, it became a centerpiece, proudly served at weddings, holidays, and deli counters that would one day feed all of New York. This dish proved something powerful. With a little time and faith, even the toughest meat